Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
No Uncertain Sound, The Life and Times of Admiral Sir Jock Slater is a new book written by Captain Peter Hore, looking into the life and times of Admiral Sir Jock Slater, whose career culminated as First Sea Lord from 1995 to 1998, looking at pivotal moments in the evolution of British naval and air power during the late 20th century. Delighted to say that the author of the book, Captain Peter Hore, joins me live on the line this morning. Good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning to you, sir.
Good. Please don't call me sir, Captain. Of all the things. Whereabouts are you? Where do we find you? Are you somewhere off the Northern Cape, or where are you today?
No, I'm in West Sussex. Somewhere south of Guildford, where it's damp and cold.
Right. Well, okay.
Unlike you,
I'll send the course around for you immediately, sir. So, for those,
thank you.
For those who may, the name might ring a sort of a dim and distant bell in the back of their old grey matter. But just explain, if you like, who Admiral Sir Jock Slater, who he is, who he was.
He was an admiral in the Royal Navy. He's still alive. He's still with us.
Yes.
But he was an extraordinary fellow because, to borrow a modern recruiting slogan, he was born in Edinburgh but made in the Royal Navy. And the book talks about his early service when he was being made in the Royal Navy, and then goes on in a sort of the second part of the book really to discuss his 14 years as a flag officer. That's something of a record for a peacetime officer. But of course, it wasn't really the peacetime. It was a Cold War, and it was largely his efforts that helped us to win the Cold War and bring the Cold War to a successful and peaceful conclusion.
Could one argue that it is perhaps a more difficult task to, and excuse the pun, steer your ship sort of successfully during a Cold War period, because the object of the exercise is not to engage, is not to have sort of flashpoint naval maneuvers and exercises, but to keep a calm head, but know strategically rather than tactically what you're doing.
I think that's absolutely spot on, and at the same time that he was exercising his great judgment as First Sea Lord in the years in the 1990s, he was also conducting secret staff talks with the Russians to ensure that we didn't start a war by accident at sea.
Perhaps the very nature of when did he first go into the Navy? I mean, presumably, does he do Dartmouth? Does he?
He joined Dartmouth in the late 1950s. His great uncle was ABC Admiral Cunningham.
Right. Now we're talking.
It's a very amusing story because he was brought up largely under the influence of Admiral Cunningham, and when he went for his Admiralty interview board, Admiral Cunningham drove him there from his house at Bishop's Waltham in his car. He told Jock to wear a kilt because Jock is a Scotsman. Told Jock to wear a kilt, but he dropped him short of the main gate. Told him to walk from there.
Because with a pedigree like that in your family, ABC, I mean, nothing more than a legend and so therefore you could be overawed, and you could be, to use modern parts, accused of being a Nepo baby, a Nepo baby, even, Peter.
Yeah, but he wasn't, and ABC was very careful not to exercise any discretion in Jock's favour, even though Jock, when he was in Portsmouth, for instance, would spend the weekends with the Admiral, learning from him about how he had fought and won the Second World War.
So because many of us, we will kind of, we'll sort of know the Navy as sort of ratings, and you might get commander, but then the whole thing, we kind of lose the order on how one progresses up the scale, as it were. Can you give us, the listeners, just sort of a very, very quick explanation of how the system works? Do you go as an ensign? I mean, how do you go to?
Jock started. I can't understand. That's a good question. Jock started as a cadet at Dartmouth. He did extremely well there. He won the Queen's Sword and he won the Queen's Telescope. And he went to sea. He had a fairly ordinary start at sea. He was at sea in a little tiny ship called Yaxham, which is no bigger than one of those patrol boats you see in the harbour in Gibraltar.
Yep.
And from there he progressed very slowly through. He served in a ship called Trowbridge. Trowbridge may ring a bell with some of your listeners because it was taken as the model by the BBC for HMS Troutbridge. Do you remember the Navy Lark comedy?
Yes, indeed, yes.
Yeah, so he was in HMS Trowbridge, and he kept in contact. He kept in touch with the cast of HMS Troutbridge, the Navy Lark. But his real stroke of luck came when he was selected to be an equerry to the Queen. And as a lieutenant, he spent 3 years becoming an intimate of the royal family. And from there, after 3 years, quite unexpectedly, he was promoted to commander. He'd never been to sea as a lieutenant commander.
Right.
And that's when I first met him, because he was sent to a ship called HMS Jupiter, where I was serving myself.
Now, the thing with the senior service, as it should be referred to, is the fact that there are so many disparate, if you like, aspects to sort of commanding and keeping a tab on what's going on, I suppose, with that. I mean, we've got everything from, obviously the fleet, then you've got aircraft carriers, you've got the submarines, you've got the Royal Marines. I mean, it is, and plus the protocol that goes with it. How easily did Jock take to that role itself?
He took to it, if I may say, like a duck to water, frankly. He didn't serve in submarines or didn't serve as a pilot, but he commanded an aircraft carrier, and he commanded an anti-aircraft destroyer, and he commanded HMS Jupiter frigate, commanded a minesweeper, so he had all that experience behind him before he became promoted to an admiral.
And so, how important is it to have a thorough knowledge of, if you like, combined arms in this thing, so using all the aspects of the modern Royal Navy, and also, how aware was he as the way that, since the mid-50s, the naval warfare is not a story of big gunships, like the Bismarck against the Hood, for example. It is a story of forces engaging literally hundreds of miles apart from each other.
Yeah, it's more than that, because not only did Jock have this tactical all-arms knowledge about warfare at sea, but once he became an admiral, he was also very conscious of the need for joint warfare and for cooperation with the land and air elements with the Army and the Air Force. So he had a very broad background, and he studied his subject very carefully. And he dealt adroitly both with those aspects, for instance, like creating a permanent joint headquarters. So whereas before operations had been run by the individual services, he was a strong advocate of a single joint headquarters where all operations would be conducted. And he also dealt adroitly with the political aspects of being an admiral. Whether it was sent Wrens to sea, integrating the Royal Marines more closely into the Navy, and later, in his later years, with the Strategic Defence Review in 1966-97.
How talking about those political shifts as well, how adroit do you have to be with dealing with politicians? Because, again, they come in on their 4-year terms or whatever, and they might have some ideas on, I don't know, Trident or whatever else, or they might want to say, well, we need to have more women in the service, we will have more diversity in the service, which is obviously, without using the W word on a Monday, Peter, but the infamous... Yeah. I mean, how aware was he of the demands of a modern naval fleet and having to balance, what the Navy needs to what the politicians are pushing for, which might just be something to put on the news as a soundbite that day?
Well, he'd had that 3 years working in the royal palaces. He'd become a politician, a minor with a small p, of course, and a courtier, and he dealt very well with politicians. He both in the major government with people like Earl Howe and Nicholas Soames. And then when the Labour government came to power under Tony Blair, he was very fortunate, I think, in that George Robertson and John Reid, two Scotsmen, became the senior ministers in the Ministry of Defence, and there was a natural affinity. They may have supported different football teams, but there was a natural affinity with these fellow Scots.
And so, when you talk about the Strategic Defence Review, politicians always like to say that we have the finest forces, the best trained forces in the armed forces in the world, but at the same time they are seem to be constantly cutting the ground from beneath their feet, or the abilities to do that. So how did he manage to balance the what was going to be needed in the 21st century against a government that wants to cut sort of standard, if you like, naval forces?
Yes, I think it's a sadness of the 20th century that he served in a period when the defence budget was falling as a proportion of GDP year upon year. It fell throughout his service from the late 1950s right away up until almost the present day. But in the Strategic Defence Review, he fought very hard for a new generation of aircraft carriers, and he fought very hard for a Harrier replacement. And he was successful, because the Strategic Defence Review in that period, the late 90s, actually altered British defence strategy from facing the Russians on the Western Front in Germany to being a maritime and an expeditionary force. And that, I should think, was his single greatest achievement.
And here we are, I was going to say 30 years later almost, and yet there are reports. You can't open your front pages of the Times saying, "Oh well, there's a shadow Russian fleet operating. There are 30 Russian research ships off the North Sea." Quote, and I'm using quote unquote there. We still need to have a navy that is operative, that isn't overstretched, because maritime, the British, the reason for the British being such a power is traditionally being our maritime strength. So therefore, it's not as history, as it seems to be proved recently, it's not all about cyber warfare. It's the old fashioned, who has a presence off your coast or on your cables underneath the sea or whatever, still has a major effect on what's going on. And perhaps that's something that he realizes as well.
He realized it. In the 1990s, he was very cautious about victory at the end of the Cold War, because he thought that triumphalism and capitalism didn't work very well. They were a bit of a poke in the eye to the Russians, and he warned that we had to treat them very carefully. He also warned, however, that we had to keep our defences up. And I'm really sorry to say in the 21st century, he was then retired when our armed forces actually went into serious decline. And we need now to recover, and recover quickly and to spend more on defence.
But the problem with that, Peter, is it might be quite relatively easy to issue a new set of ammunition or an upgrade in rifles and whatever, but you can't just suddenly turn around and to a shipyard and say, all right, we want 30 frigates by this time next week. It's a long thought out strategic rather than a knee jerk. Yeah,
you're absolutely right, Giles. We need desperately to place those orders for ships and aircraft and for other equipment now, because it will take considerable time. It'll take years to build up those forces which we have given up on in the 21st century.
So what is his relationship like with the former Soviet Union, with the Russians? Do you have a grudging respect to them? Because perhaps one of the biggest things that we could congratulate him on is the fact that we don't hear of any clashes taking place, off the Bering Strait or heading out to Murmansk or anything like that. Is that because we, as the present company accepted, as civilians sitting here in a radio station in Spain, we don't get to hear that apart from when something goes, whizzing by past Gibraltar. So therefore, is it his soft power? Is the fact that he, as we said, strategically he knew what was going on, so we didn't get to a tactical situation?
Yes. The key thing to realise, to appreciate in Jock's career, particularly when he was the first Sea Lord, was we were conducting these covert staff talks with the Russians. I myself helped to organise some of those talks. And I give you an example. We took over an Oxford college during a summer vacation with a group of Russian officers, and we discussed, quite frankly, what we would do if we met each other at sea, and how to avoid, for instance, illuminating each other with our fire control radars and giving sending some mistaken threat message. And he also developed personal relationships with the chief of the then Soviet naval staff. And do you remember when when that Russian submarine sank up in the Arctic? Jock wanted to ring up his opposite number in Moscow and offer help to go and rescue the sailors. That's how close the relationships got. They were based on mutual respect.
Was that Kursk?
They were also...
Was that the Kursk, or was that a different one?
The Kursk, yes, the Kursk. So, that was the depth of the relationships which we had reached. And we also began to appreciate, too, that these weren't people 10 feet tall with snow in their boots. They were actually, some of their equipment was rather more limited than we gave it credit for.
That's a great understatement. I couldn't help this, but the foreword is written by Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal. What's her relationship? Phrase this correctly in case I get allowed back in the country. But what is her relationship with Admiral Sir Jock Slater?
Jock was in the palace as the Queen's Elizabeth II's equerry when he was only a few years older than Prince Charles and Princess Anne.
Right.
And he formed a lifelong friendship with them, and which continues to this day. So it was really nice of the Princess Royal to volunteer to write this forward, which I have to say she did without reading the book, trusting me, I suppose.
What are you hoping that people will learn and discover from your biography of Admiral Sir Jock Slater, and why is it called No Uncertain Sound?
Right. Well, that's the first question. The first question is that I hope they learn what the Navy was like in that period, in the late 20th century. It was a Navy which, to some extent, no longer exists. It was much larger. It was a great club. It had a worldwide influence, and it was coming to the end, I think. As a historian, I have to tell you, the Royal Navy was as important in history as the Roman legions or the grand armies of France. So it's an important subject to study, I think. As for the title, well, it comes from the motto of HMS Illustrious, which was one of Jock's commands, non vox incerta, let the trumpet sound with no uncertain sound, lest we be unprepared for war. So the message is there very clearly, we must be prepared.
The book is called No Uncertain Time, The Life and Times of Admiral Sir Jock Slater. It is by Captain Peter Hore we're talking to today. Captain, if people want to find you online and say nice things to you, where can they find you?
They can find me on Facebook and find me on Twitter. They can find me. I'm sure you can give out my email address. I'm very happy for you to do that.
Marvellous. And also you can order it via our own virtual bookstore as well. The book is called...
I see it. I see. I've got some messages coming in already.
There you go. You see the power of the modern radio. The book is called No Uncertain Sound. I trust they're good ones. No Uncertain Sound. The Life and Times of Admiral Sir Jock Slater. It's by Captain Peter Hore. Peter, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you this morning.
Thank you. It's great fun to talk to you, Giles.